everybody. Welcome to Formalism Friday with myself, Carson Grubaugh, and as always, Brandon Graham. Hey, Brandon, how's it going?
Hey, Carson. Good. How are you doing?
Doing good. We were having an off-camera discussion that I thought, well, this actually makes a really interesting conversation that we should pick up on. So you're explaining to me that you have switched up your working style lately.
Right. Yeah. So I'm working for a video game company. They're having me do a comic for them, and I was delivering 4 pages every week, and it was kind of like that was my top speed usually for my last couple books. I'm just like try to do 4 pages a week, and sometimes it's 3, and on great weeks it's 5. But my new schedule is I basically pencil. I spend a week penciling 10 pages, and I literally just do them on 11 by 17 typing paper and just Sharpie out some really rough stuff, and then I light table them the next week, and I was able to ink and color 9 pages in a week, which is a record for me, and letter them as well.
And the penciling was about 10 pages a week as well.
Yeah, so basically I take a week and I rough out the whole issue really ugly, and then
Okay.
I pencil 10 pages and then draw. And we were just talking about how when you just did your recent kind of AI generated comic about how you planned out the entire issues,
Well,
how that's a better process.
yeah, there was a couple. That one was, I didn't think about it as like a whole thing at first. It was just 5 or 4 separate experiments that we were going to run. Like, what happens if I plug this essay into an AI? Can we tell a story with the AI? What happens if an AI writes and draws a book? And then we got another essay. So that was pretty much going back to the first one of just plugging it in and seeing what it does. But because I was working on them all kind of concurrently, and then issue 2 and 3 are a story, and I started it and Sean's finished it. So I was working on issue 3, 4, and 5, or 4 and 5, 1, 2, 4, and 5, while Sean was working on issue 3. And when I got the issue 3 script back, because I had everything else already, it was really easy to go back and tweak parts of issue 2 and 3 in the dialogue, than to kind of resonate with things in the other issues and kind of make it congeal as a whole in a way that we hadn't planned. And that gave me a taste of like working on the whole structure all at once that I think I'd carry over into everything. So it sounds like you're at least thumbnailing the whole thing all at once.
Yeah, and I'm finding myself going back, like once I have the whole thing and can read it, I kept going back and reworking pages, which is something when you're working page by page, it's like you just kind of, it's very rare that I go back and fix anything from earlier. It's more just like, oh, it's got to work, keep going.
Yeah.
Which I think is a fun way to work, but it's nice to be able to have an ugly version of the whole book in front of you and be able to be like, this could use some more space. Especially, I'm working in like very monthly 20-page structures, so I think it's really nice to be able to give yourself more space in different places when it's needed.
Yeah, well, and like Rain Like Hammers had that, where you have like the story of this guy in issue 1, and then he just disappears for 3 issues, and then he comes back in issue 5. Was that one thing where you had like planned it out, or kind of you just were winging it as you went and you saw a way to wrap him back in?
Yeah, it was pretty much the entirety of my comic career is me winging it as I go.
Okay.
So it's always amazing when it works out, and when it's a little like it's almost, I have to regard making comics sometimes as like a fun experiment rather than a math problem that has to be solved. And it is kind of amazing to me how often it works. It's just like, because I think part of it is your brain just allows for the magic of comics, of drawing a single image and then convincing yourself that things are happening there.
Yeah, and I think I'm more of the mathematician normally, by like just personality, like when we were working on Strange Death, obviously Dave was doing all the planning, so I didn't have that stage in my control, but he would send them to me and kind of want me to just be drawing them as they came in, and I would always tell him like, no, I need the whole book. Like, I'm not going to start drawing it until I got the whole book. So I would do all the prep work, because that doesn't really, it's just putting some stuff together in Photoshop and tracing it off. And there's no real like flow state that I had to get into there. But inking it, I would not ink it until I had like all of volume 2 ready to go. And then all of those pages that I had to do from where he left off, once I had all of them ready to print out ink, then I started inking. Because for me, like, inking is, I have to get into it, and the first couple pages are shitty, but then then once I get into it, then it's like, okay, well, I'm good for however long I keep going. I'm going to be in this like flow state.
Oh, interesting. Do you listen to anything specifically while you're inking?
No, oftentimes just watch some kind of TV show.
Oh, that's amazing. I can't have visual stuff on when I'm, because I don't know if I mentioned this before, but I have 2 Miles Davis albums that I play every time I have to write, and it's almost like a Pavlovian, like, okay, it's time to write. It's Miles Davis.
Huh? Which 2 albums?
It's Kind of Blue and Bitches Brew.
Bitches Brew. Okay, that has to be in there, because
Yeah.
that's really like.
Yeah, I mean, and they're good for thinking, I think. But yeah, and then for drawing, I have to have like I'm listening to the Gore, like Assassin of Gore audiobook right now, just like trashy fantasy murder stuff that kind of keep my mind interested while I just ink out things.
So that's interesting to me, because I would think that the descriptions in the book would get in the way of, or maybe override, the visualizing you need to do to draw.
Well, I think a lot of it is is like I'll do all the thinking work with just no music or no lyric music, and then once it's kind of roughed out in pencil, then I can be, sometimes I actually have to pause the audiobook or go back because I missed the thing, because you get stuck in like, drawing something and thinking about it.
Yeah, I would think so. And I guess, I don't know, but by the time I get to inking, it's pure, because working, especially in the Strange Death stuff, I'm not solving any problems really. It's purely responsive. Like,
Okay.
the structure is solved, right? I've cheated on that and traced it to save myself time. And then like the inking is just shapes. Just, there's a shape there on the reference, I'm gonna put that shape down there on ink. So it's actually better for me to have like a story going, because then that part of my brain is occupied, and
Okay.
it's just hand-eye coordination, like subconscious. That's the best way for me to be when I'm inking, that style at least. In a different style, I wouldn't be able to do that.
I think I prefer to have my pencils ugly enough where I'm doing the drawing and inking.
Yeah, that's what I learned too, is like, the first volume of Strange Death, I actually inked it twice almost. I would do it all with like a pigment liner,
Okay.
because I was trying to mimic certain lines and certain drawings, and I wanted to like like sketchy my way through the line weight and shit, and then be able to just like trace it over with the brush more responsive. But by volume 2, I was like, no, that's so stiff and static. This really simple like line drawing of the proportions, and then everything else is completely spontaneous, and that feels so much, because then you're doing the drawing in the ink.
Yeah,
Like,
and you're
that
not
is
trying
the
to
drawing.
copy a drawing as much. I recently read an issue of Go-Go 13 here, Into the Wolves' Lair.
I need to read some of that.
It's really fun. I really like these. He kind of isn't a character as much as he's like a force in nature. But I watched a documentary, a Monben documentary about the author of it, T. Saito, and he doesn't pencil faces at all. He'll just do all the faces straight to ink to have like a spontaneous thing to them.
Yeah, there was another one. Another one of those Monbin that one of our viewers pointed out to me. I thought I'd watched them all, but they're still posting new ones every now and then. And they have the guy that did the Gundam, the Origins, and all of his stuff. He doesn't lay anything out. He just gets out the page and lays out the panels, and then starts filling them in with pencil. like straight to the image. I was like, Jesus.
That's upsetting. I remember, I don't know if I've talked about my friend James Stocco. He has this
Hmm.
really weird way of working where he does no layouts ahead of time, and he'll literally start at the top corner of a page and just start drawing and then fill it out like a crazy person. And I had somebody, remember I went to lunch years ago with the guy who did Tales of the Bean World, Larry Martyr,
Oh,
and
yeah.
he was explaining how Jack Kirby worked, and I sounded like an asshole because he kept being like, Kirby would do this, and I'd be like, I know a guy like that. Oh yeah, I know a guy that does that too. So yeah, Kirby and Stocco, I guess, work very similar in ways.
Well, I can do that. Like that's how I draw naturally, actually, when I'm not looking at something, I
Mhm.
just I just go and it comes out. But the problem is I can do that for one image, but then Stocco could like do a whole book that way. So he could have a character and that character shows up being like I was just looking at his something Sluggers book. It's like a baseball team beating up a bunch of demons.
Sullivan
Uh,
Sluggers.
yeah, Sullivan Sluggers. And the characters will, or the monster maintains consistency.
Mhm.
And so that's baffling to me because I could freestyle a monster like that, but then one time, but then to draw it a second time is difficult. And I've been pushing myself to do straight to ink comics, and my like that Superman one
Oh
was
yeah.
just like get a pen and sit down and draw a comic page straight to ink, and it's really hard for me to not just have every panel be some totally random different character and creature.
Oh, I feel like the difficulty in that would be like not, boxing your painting yourself into a corner. Because your Superman one, I was really impressed by the. I don't know if you have that up there, but I remember the paneling was really nice in it.
I don't, I'll put it on Instagram sometime in the
Sure.
next couple days. I have it on my phone,
Do you
but
know the
it's
Mobius story that he did all in ink? It's like Absolute Citron or something. Is that what I'm thinking of?
no,
There's
wasn't
one of the
Airtight
characters
Garage
running
like
and
that?
what's that?
Wasn't Airtight Garage just totally winging it?
I think Airtight Garage is winging it, but he penciled it still. There's one specific
Okay.
story that's a guy running through the forest and he falls and becomes a nuclear explosion at the end, and that was just done straight to ink.
Oh, it's a fun way to go. I want to do more of it, but I'm not enough of a pre-visualizer. Like I said, like to have okay, now I know what this character looks like. I'm going to show him doing this, and this without penciling it like that. No, that will never happen for me because I couldn't do that even if I penciled it. Probably I suck at that. But it's a fun way to work, and I like the spontaneity. And I think what I learned from working on the abolition of man with the AI is that was a weird combination of the spontaneity and the ability to see the whole structure at once.
Hmm.
Because with the AI handling the art, it's just everything happens so quickly. And this is how we started this conversation, is like how much fun it is to get the initial idea, and then how much the rest of it is just like, ah, fuck, now I got to go do it. And like that book was awesome because the initial idea and the doing were all wrapped up into, like a couple weeks of
Sure.
making these 5 different books. And then we were able to go, like I was able to go back and rewrite, like basically rescript the book because the lettering's being done digitally and stuff. And so there was a lot of things where I felt like we fleshed out the world after the book was made, and then we're able to go back in. And like one thing that I realized halfway through is like it's this kind of social in the narrative part, it's like this socialist tech utopia where no one has to work anymore, they just work to stay busy.
Hmm.
And so I also wanted to I realized at some point that I wanted to have a gender neutral pronoun that got used throughout the whole thing. Like the playing field's been totally leveled out for everyone. And so I was able, initially it was he, she, and all that. And we were able to
Right.
really easily go back and replace things. And that led to, okay, well, then we can't say his sister, it has, or we can't say, I don't know. So it just, we were able to solve those problems like on the fly of like, well, it's his
Okay, I like that.
femcis,
What
there's a
pronoun did you go with?
son, sun.
Okay, I like that.
Like everyone's their own individual son.
Oh, that's
So
cool. I mean, yeah, that creates all different kinds of I do like that, especially in like science fiction stuff, how caught up in language you can get. I remember I was driving myself crazy when I was writing Prophet because there's one point where I had a character use some kind of slang thing, and I was on a deadline. And I was like, oh shit, that went out, and I had to go through this whole process in my brain where I was like, oh no, none of the language they'd speak in 10,000 years would be recognizable as English anyway. So this whole
Yeah.
comic would be like translated. So I shouldn't get so caught up in specific words. It's about conveying the tone of how it feels more than anything.
Yeah, I mean it's tempting, and I think we fell into the temptation, like, to do the Alan Moore thing, right, where you kind of develop reusable language for world building. But it makes sense in a sci-fi context to do, like, you're in the future, language evolves, so go with it.
Yeah, and it's also just fun to like you get into more kind of building of the characters in the world if you have like you just said like everyone being their own son. It's a whole like you've explained this whole like belief system just from the usage of a word.
Yeah, without having to go too far into it. And it fits in with the slogan that was already in the book that people use over and over: choose to change the sun.
Hmm.
And then, but then you have to go back and rewrite, well, you're probably not going to call it a sister, like, or you know, talking about sexual preferences or something. They won't say that I prefer men or women. They'll say I prefer fem or mass, you know,
Yeah.
like feminine or masculine. And that could be applied to, well, you know, like I like a feminine man, like your preferences for the feminine. So those like kind of cultural things. So then it's like, okay, well, uh his sister would be his fem sib, his female sibling.
Okay.
And yeah, it's fun to like, all that's in my head, and then it just shows up on the page as a word. And so you do kind of this world building, um which I've never been like a world builder guy, but it was so fluid within that process of like viewing the totality. So
Huh. I
it's,
feel
that's
that stuff's
convinced
really
me
fun.
that total, having the total picture, like you said, having it all laid out and then
Mhm.
being able to go back and tweak it, there's really something to be said for that.
Yeah, there's also something nice about when you're writing something and you do something like that, going through this whole process of thinking it through. And I've had a lot of things where I'll be drawing a background and I'll be thinking of what something is in relation to the background, just like it's a building or something. And then later on that informs the writing of the story. And you're like, well, these things I was kept drawing in the background, that can be a thing that then actually is part of the story where before it was just a detail that was something that no one would notice but me.
Yeah, and I always connect that to, like, if you do it right, it feels like the best comedy is always the joke that you just make off the cuff and you're like, holy shit, I can't believe that just came out.
Sure.
Right? It's like freestyle rapping. Like the really good ones are the ones that just happen and you're like, damn. And I've always been such a controlled person that I didn't allow for that.
Hmm.
And it was really nice to experience that. But then it's the task of like, okay, working like you're working now, where you're chunking it. How do I bring that free flow style back into the creation of another book that's chunked, where I plan the whole thing out?
Yeah, I
And
guess you have moments where you kind of break the, you'll be like, oh, what if I change this one? Like even in pre-planning, like I had the last page that I was working on, I did a thing where it's just like they're on a living spaceship and there's a hole in the ground that's opening for them to go inside of it. And I did one that was like it at their feet and then one of it bigger. And when I was inking it, I just was like, oh, this isn't that interesting. So I redrew it from the point of view of looking up through the hole to see the characters looking into it. And it's nice just to spontaneously like scrap a panel and put in a new version of it. I was thinking before about when you're talking about kind of maintaining the enthusiasm of an idea all the way through. Like oftentimes my stories when I make an actual comic, they become something better, I think, for me, but it's always a change. And I was telling my girlfriend the other day about how um, sometimes I like ideas that never went anywhere because you can kind of hold on to that idea of how you remember the initial concept. And I was explaining to her about how I had a story where I really wanted all the characters to have cities as names, and the characters were all named like Seattle and Los Angeles and everything.
Okay.
And I was like, and I wanted it to have the feel of like at night when you're in a city and you're driving on the freeway through the underground tunnel.
Hmm.
And she immediately went to this like, oh, and then the tunnel could open up and do a different world. And I was like, no, just the feeling of driving in the tunnel. That's as much work as I put on that. And and like 15 years later, I'm still just like, oh, that would be an interesting story, but I have no story.
But if it turned into like a full-blooded story, you'd lose
You'd
whatever.
probably forget what the impetus was, right? Because anything like any of the books that I worked on, like I remember that King City started as a where there was a guy in a suit that had a cat in a briefcase, but I don't remember how that felt or even why I was doing that, you know.
Do you find that like your books, or I mean, for me, just art in general, I'm like trying to answer some question, or I have some point that I think I'm trying to make, and that's even worse because by the time I'm done, I always believe the complete opposite point. I've always talked to myself out of it, but
Interesting.
I feel like there's this questioning that goes on, and so oftentimes by the end of the project, the the question has kind of been answered before I finish the project, and that's where I really lose juice.
Can you think of a thing that you started, like a specific thing where you started something and then your mind changed on it by the end?
Oh yeah, for sure. I mean, like Alan Moore caused me to waste like 10 years of my life on a painting project because Promethea got me so into the Kabbalah.
Oh, sure.
The view of the Kabbalah that he presented in Promethea was so captivating to me that I went and did this huge series of like 10 really large paintings, and I was going to paint like every tarot card, and it's total like 20-year-old bullshit to do your own tarot card series. Like all of my students do it, and I go, oh fuck, I was that guy too. um
I mean, I
yeah,
understand
so
the appeal.
sorry, say that again.
I said I understand the appeal. I'm not doing it, but I understand the appeal.
I just thought, like it's really easy to think you're the one who understands this arcane knowledge when like every 20-year-old's reading those books. um
But
so
it's also
yeah,
baking in all this it's the idea people could read your art as like a guide for their life is pretty exciting.
a guide for like the universe
Yeah.
itself, right? Like that's what Promethea felt like to me, and so I wanted to go consume everything I could about that and then synthesize it into my own art. And I was sold on his kind of outlook as a worldview going into it, and for many years I would have argued his worldview, and I came out of the project like, this is just a load of nonsense. He's got it entirely ass backwards, 180 degrees wrong
Hmm.
view of reality. I working on the project completely undermined any ability I had to believe in that
Oh,
system
interesting.
anymore.
Yeah, I don't think I share Moore's belief system, but it's certainly an interesting one to dig into.
Yeah, it was just like, I was reading that at 19, 20, having been raised as a Christian,
Hmm.
and it's pretty he's such a convincing writer, and you throw in J.H. Williams with that art that he was doing and
I
all
know
the
it's not, you
formal
didn't have a chance.
trickery. Yeah, like it. So I don't know, but do you get that, like the evolution of does your art help you evolve your?
I work out ideas. I think that what I generally tend to do is I try to have themes I cling to.
Mm-hmm.
You know, like the comic I'm working on now, the Moonray video game thing. I'm trying to go with the theme of figuring out uh, your own ideology and your own idea of self when you have these kind of group things that are kind of trying to pull you in different directions.
Mm-hmm.
And it's this very vague idea, but I think it's really it's kind of like over the last couple of years I've been really like almost struggling to redefine my own belief system, and so it's really good to have that to work through in art. But I don't know if I'm answering any questions as much as I'm like just kind of trying to create a series of stories that are fun and play with this theme.
I think well, and you did that with Rain Like Hammers too. Like there was one of the things that when we went through that book and talked to you about it, I kept coming back to identity, and there was like, I don't know, 5, 6, 7 different, and you didn't even, you were like, I didn't know that was a
Oh, sure.
philosophical idea I have it in, but you touched on like 5 or 6 different kind of viewpoints about what constitutes personal identity without settling on one of them. And I think that's a really mature way of working. Whereas the Alan Moore, and this is what I've come to dislike about him, and it it tainted the way I worked, and I'm still trying to shed it, is he has a viewpoint that he's trying to sell you on,
Hmm.
right? Like, this is my magical worldview. This is my view about how time works. And so it's like being preached to, and he's just so clever that you're like, wow, this is great. But there's something very 20s about that. And I think I've had to learn, okay, the really mature work that I like is theme based, exactly like you said, right? Like, you explore a theme, but you never really, you just look at it from all sides, but you never really play your hand on which one you subscribe to.
Well, I mean, maybe part of it for me is I don't know how I feel about a lot of things, you know?
Yeah.
And that's the thing, is like when you really sit at a page and think for 6 hours a day, like you kind of arrive at just like, I don't know, maybe, you know?
But it sounds like you don't ever walk away going, okay, this is the one that I'm not 100% sold, but this is the one I'm gonna kind of place my money on for now.
Yeah, probably not. I mean, it's interesting because there's comics that are really effective at, I don't know, have you read Miyazaki's Nausicaa all the way through?
No, we're going to look into that though, because the guy that we're talking about, when we were looking at Tintin, Alexis Deacon,
Mhm.
he wanted to talk about Nausicaa, so I'm gonna get that sometime soon and read that. I've never read any of it.
Okay, well, I'm jealous that you're going to read it all the way through because it's like one of the most effective comics, I think, at like selling an ideology.
Okay.
Um, yeah, it's strange. One of the things that really stuck out to me is I went through uh, I went through a moment where I'd heard so many people, you know, kind of shitting on Ayn Rand stuff over the years, you know, her being like Ronald Reagan's favorite writer and everything. And I dug into some of her stuff, and I really, you know, and Ditko was a really big, was objectivist.
Yeah,
It was
he was a Randian for sure.
Yeah, and
100%.
so I dug into her stuff, and it was really fascinating too because I had the thing where people in my life were just like, "Oh my God, you're going to read that?" Like I had a copy of Mein Kampf, and I was like, "This is great." You know, it was more just like I was like, "This is this giant cultural thing I've never actually engaged with," and I thought the Fountainhead was really obnoxious and didn't enjoy it, but her book Anthem, which is like her science fiction book, it's like a novella, I guess, short story,
Yeah.
which is just about this guy with this R2D2 of a name who kind of figures out the idea of self in a kind of collectivist future dystopian society. I thought that was a really excellent way to convey her ideology, and I just found it as a graphic novel adaptation of it. I might get.
Yeah, she's definitely a writer who is pushing a worldview, like hardcore. She's
Yeah,
also, I've only read The Fountainhead. That's the one with the architect, right?
yeah,
Yeah, the other Atlas Shrugged, I have not read. I fucking hate that book.
yeah. I don't
I
recommend that one at all. I
I
was like, if you're gonna read anything, then just the Anthem and then nothing else, and watch some interviews where you're just like, oh, this lady's really mad at communism.
but but I do think she is amazing at writing a character that instantiates an ideology,
Hmm.
because that's pretty much what the Fountainhead is, right? There's like 5 or 6 characters that represent different worldviews, and they argue it out. And then, but she's just so comfortable with like her worldview being right, and Rourke as the character being this hero sacrifice artist thing. But it's just such a fucked up, like her view of love is so fucked up, like all the rape shit, and the like you're just constantly, you need to find someone to battle against your whole life. And
Yeah,
Just,
it's a messy ideology, but
it's just miserable. It's so hard to read. But I will say I found her to be a compelling writer in that she could so build a character around a worldview and then
yeah, just an idea.
put them into play against each other. But that's more interesting when Aldous Huxley wrote Point Counterpoint, which is the same thing. He has a bunch of characters that are just philosophical worldviews and they just battle it out. And the it's one of my favorite ending scenes where it's just two people taking a bath and they're just like splashing bath water and bubbles all over the place and making a mess. And then he's like, and such is God's creation, or something like that. And that's like the end of the book. And so he does it where it's just like, I don't know, here's all these viewpoints. Good luck parsing them out, you know.
Yeah,
And
that seems like a fun way to do it. And also, I don't know. I mean, it's got to be hard to not have, you know, like if you had like 5 different characters that had different viewpoints, it'd be hard for you not to play favorites, even subconsciously. So that would be an interesting thing to try to write. One of the interesting things with the video game comic I'm doing is I'm trying to show. I'm not quite there yet, but eventually I'm going to try to show all these different ideologies that they're literally like in the video game. They're different gods that you can become part of their like houses. And I'm trying to make none of them, they're all kind of flawed, but none of them are so much better than the other one that the players will all be like, oh, I want to go to this one immediately. And we're looking at a lot of Warhammer 40K, the big video game or the big role-playing game.
yeah.
And I really like that it seems like for the most part, every section of that you can play as is horrible, but all of them are kind of equally horrible.
And so together it becomes good and compelling.
Yeah, well, it's like you have, Earth is like incredibly xenophobic and religious to this like dead emperor that they've got, hooked up to a bunch of machines, and they're also like the only people holding humanity back from like this like, demon force.
But I mean, that's more real, because like if you look at any worldview or ideology, there's something lacking in it, right? Like there is no thing where we can go, yes, like that's the great one. Like we have to have some. That's what I'm learning about
Okay.
presenting a worldview. It's like I don't want to do that because there is no. I want to remain more open, you know. I
Yeah, I
don't
was going
want
to
to
ask before when you
present a
were
view.
talking about kind of getting into tarot after being raised religious. Do you think it was you finding like a new religious structure?
Um, it was a weird kind of multi-step rebellion, I think. Like the initial step was like believing in God still, but thinking, well, this entity is just reprehensible, abhorrent. Like how could you conceive of God and think anything positive? So then it became like the real, like, you know, let's go read a bunch of Aleister Crowley and like, you know, through Alan Moore, obviously, like let's get into the occult and like let's make God the enemy and let's try to actively rebel against God. And then it's like, well, okay, well, the further I went with the Kabbalah and Alan Moore stuff, then it was like, well, okay, like you just have the wrong conception of God. It's not something that's so much of a personality, and so you can't get mad at it because it's just kind of necessity. And so like it reframed my view back into a more positive one, and it gave me like language to integrate the way I had been raised with kind of the new thoughts I was having as studying philosophy. You know, it was kind of the same time I was getting into reading philosophy and then going to school for philosophy and stuff. And then coming out of all that, it's like, well, as once you take the personality out of God, then you're really just talking about inevitability anyway. So why have God? And then you become completely a-religious and there's nothing to be mad about. But I still felt like the Kabbalah was like giving a way to talk about patterns. And then
Okay.
now I guess that's where you turn into like a Jungian archetypes, kind of collective subconscious patterns. And it
Yeah.
just, it kind of keeps shifting from there. But yeah, it was like it was a way to move from the Christian worldview to the secular worldview as like an in-between.
Hmm.
Yeah, I think Jung is good for that.
Okay. Yeah, that does sound like a good way to process it. Are you familiar? Do you ever get into Grant Morrison's kind of way he talked about working on invisibles?
Yeah,
As-
I mean that him and Alan Moore were like their thoughts on magic. I would just eat that shit up
Yeah, I
so
always liked.
much.
I don't know if it's just like the idea of it and not something I actually believe, but I love the idea that when Morrison would talk about using the invisibles to shape his real life, where he'd have himself written in there as this like King Mob character, and then he had King Mob with this cool redheaded girlfriend, and then he met his wife, I guess, that had red hair, and he attributed it to him kind of manifesting it with his work, which I think is interesting.
Well, I mean that the funny thing about that is I think Alan Moore and Grant Morrison, like the general comics community, especially Grant Morrison, held like that kind of viewpoint that he has is really held up on a pedestal. Like people get really excited about it, I think.
Sure.
But when they read Strange Death of Alex Raymond, they're like, Dave Sim is a fucking nut job. But it's the exact same thing he's proposing, that these guys use their comics to do magic to manifest their will in reality, and that
Yeah.
it wound up having these consequences.
Well, I think the external stuff gets if you have a whole community that's telling you Dave Sam is a nut job, then you're gonna not get into the strange death and with like I think Morrison gets in the ways that Dave Sam gets kind of shit on for maybe undeserved ways. I think that Morrison gets held up in a lot of things. I remember someone doing an interview with Morrison, and I knew the interviewer, and Morrison is just talking about how like he was working on a thing and a god physically appeared in front of him and told him some story or anything. And I remember my friend that was interviewing him just was like, "Oh, and then what happened?" And I was like, "How did you not just start doing the jerk off hand motion when he was talking about this stuff?" Because it's like he's selling this character of himself, which everyone like eats up, but it's like it feels a little bit like an act to me.
Well, Alan Moore, same thing, right? Like these
Part of
entities
me believes that
appear
Alan
and
Moore believes it more, but
well, but they're presenting kind of this same worldview of magic through comics, that it's like an interface that you can interact with the imaginative world, and that you can bring things in and out of the interface. And like, I mean, that's the exact same stuff Dave's talking about. And there are, I think, legitimate, I just don't attribute them to magic anymore.
sure. But
It's
also, I think
there.
Alan Moore's definition of magic, it's really vague. We'll just talk about how words can change things around you. And
Well,
it's
yeah,
literally just
which is
word
which is
influence.
true. Like if I say, "Hey, Brandon," and then you turn your head, like I've used words to make something happen in the real world. And
Yeah.
like
Which is Alan
there's a
Moore's
story about
magic.
Alistair. Yeah, there's a story about Alistair Crowley, and they say someone's challenging him, and they're like, "Well, if you're really a magician, you'd be able to make that man across the street trip without touching him." And he goes, "Okay," and he walks behind him. He goes up behind him, and he walks behind him for like 3 or 4 blocks, matching his footsteps. And so subconsciously the guy gets used to hearing the two footsteps matched up, and then Crowley scuffs his foot and the guy stumbles.
Huh.
And who knows if that's true or not, but
It's a good story.
it's a good story, and it makes a good point. And I think that's where I came with the Strange Death of Alex Raymond stuff, is like, yeah, you can, if you sit around putting your real life into a comic, that's going to have psychological consequences on you. Like Grant Morrison sitting around writing about dating a hot redhead. When he ran into the hot redhead, he was like, there she is. And he was more likely to go after her because his belief in it. And then he probably was like, had this super charming romantic, hey, look, I wrote you into the story before I met you that helped seal the deal.
Oh, sure.
Like, there's not magic, it's just a chain of psychological consequences that
Right.
I mean, you could believe that it has some higher, like Dave does, that there's some higher chessboard that you don't know you're operating on, and things are working through you, or you can just believe in patterns or whatever. But
Yeah, I mean, that's the frustrating thing about being a person, is sometimes just kind of jumping into things with just blind ignorance means that you'll have the best success with them.
yeah, but I think you're going back to like our working processes. I think with my education and philosophy, I got misled for many, many years to this like presenting the answer way of operating, and being like overly exposed to that stuff. Like there's no way I could write a book that grapples with identity without being very explicitly aware of the different viewpoints. Whereas like you're more free to go intuit all of these things, and there's something more honest about that, and I think that's allowing you to not present that worldview so explicitly, which is to your benefit. And I'm trying to figure out how to recover that in my own
Because I
work.
certainly have worldviews in my work. Like, I felt like Prophet was very cynical about just everything leading to war and destruction. Um, yeah, but maybe, I don't know, maybe post Rain Like Hammers, I'm in a different mind frame.
But you seem more willing to kind of like explore it as you go, where I, up until now, I've always like, I'm not even going to start working on it until I know every piece of the puzzle, and there's something off-putting about that now
Oh,
to
yeah.
me.
I mean, I think having a loose framework and then filling it out as you go is a really fun way to work, if you could allow yourself to do that.
Yeah, and so I'm trying to figure out how to balance what we were talking about, which is chunking everything into like layout stage, finishing stage, but also have the looseness in there. I don't know. It's a very difficult problem.
Well, there has to be moments of spontaneity, right? Where it's like, if you're writing the dialogue in a scene, then there's a moment where you have to come up with the roughest, ugliest version of the text, or the roughest, ugliest version of a drawing. And then sometimes it's about deciding if you're like, oh, am I just going to stick with my first impulse, or am I going to polish it up?
Yeah.
Maybe
How
that,
how
yeah.
how long do things tend to stick around in your head before you get to them?
I mean, comics are such a weird process, right? It's like you can have an idea for a book you want to do, and then just know that you won't get to it for 4 years, and then you have to see if you'll care when you get to it.
Yeah, I'm struggling with that too. Like that it's such a long process that maintaining that initial thing gets hard. I mean, like the thing I want to do next that I was supposed to work on this summer, we got sidetracked by this AI comic, which
Sure.
is great. I mean, that was probably the most fun I've ever had, and it's the proudest I've ever been of anything because of the speed with which it came together. But now
Sure.
I'm like a whole nother year delayed on this other thing, and it's just starting to feel less and less relevant. And as time goes by, those problems that maybe you'd want to solve on the fly that would make them feel exciting, you're solving them. Oh yeah, but then they sit for a year, and that makes it richer and poorer somehow, I think, for
Yeah,
me.
it really does. I had a story that I one of the only comics that I've ever done and not finished. This thing called Footprints on Another World. It was, I told people the story too much, and I felt like I'd already finished it, so I didn't bother to draw the comic.
Yeah, it's weird. But do you ever feel like a regret about that? Like, do you still, does that idea still kind of pick at you?
I mean, not that one, but I mean, there are things where, I mean, I think for me, a lot of it is like you have a rough idea, and then when you actually try to make it work, um, it usually falls apart for me. Like, I'll think like, oh, I have A, B, and C happen in this comic book, and then you get to the actual thing, and then you have all these new problems you didn't consider. Part of it because it's like a visual medium, and you're like, oh, um, I'll just have a car jump off a freeway and land on the top of the building here. and you can say that and it's simple enough, but then like figuring out how to convey that visually is a totally different animal. And so I think having, like, leaving myself with problems to solve, like I'm working on a book right now called The Bastard Machine,
Hmm.
and I know that the final issue is a culmination of all these other issues leading up to it, but I'm kind of solving the problems of the last issue bit by bit as I do the 4 issues leading up to that. Um, yeah, and it's stressful because you're like, I don't know if, like, hopefully this works out by the time I get there. But yeah, I think kind of leaving, and luckily I think it's like on my part partially is laziness is why I don't polish out everything before I get to the thing, but kind of leaving yourself with holes to write that you have to draw really seems like the only way to kind of keep it going, and also allowing a story to really change by the time that you're in it. I would sometimes I would feel kind of stuck in a story, and I would write down like just a piece of paper and write down every version of the story that I could possibly think of every direction it could go from that point. And even by the time you have like 15 different things, you're like, oh, this one's actually fun, I'm going to do that, and you feel less locked into what you think you have to do next.
I see. I want to work like that on something. One of the things that holds me back is I need to get better at cartooning. Like when you're working in the photorealist style, that really limits your abilities, you know, uh,
Sure.
because like you're always kind of having to impose upon someone to like, hey, can you go? I need to take you out to this situation and have you do this, and it's
Yeah.
really limiting. So I'm trying something I've been playing with in my sketchbooks, and I think I'm just gonna go. There's a bookstore. I hope they still have it. It's like the best of New Yorker cartoons, and
Hmm.
I just need to really go down the rabbit hole of like cartooning rather than comics, like just from a purely drawing standpoint, and develop
Yeah.
some style that will let me bang pages out.
Well, I've seen you do much more cartoony stuff, and I feel like you definitely have it in you. Um, yeah, Peter Arno is one of my favorite guys from that era. Do you know his stuff?
I'm familiar with the name. Like that's a vocabulary. Like I'm familiar with the names of some of those guys, but I don't have that clear sense of what they've done, and I need to get better at that, I think.
Okay. Yeah, Arno, my favorite strip of his is one where it's really stupid, but it makes me laugh every time I think of it. It's a guy, it's like a guy praying, like, like a Muslim guy, like down praying, and there's an American driving by him in a car really fast, and he's yelling out the window, "Hey Mac, which way to Mecca?" Really stupid
It's
joke.
an asshole thing to do.
Yeah. Oh, and Charles Adams is another great guy, the Adams Family guy.
Yeah,
Like, comics are
he's
fantastic.
good. I just like when I sit around and do it in my sketchbook, I'm like, fuck, I don't even know like what process. Like to me, like I've never looked at the New Yorker and stuff because I just not like a one image gag type of guy normally.
Sure.
Like sometimes I'll get chuckles, but I need to reconsider it just from a pure drawing standpoint to open up the availability of a more, even if it's something not funny, something serious. Like I just have this vision of doing a open-ended like Gilbert Hernandez type of thing
Oh yeah. I
about
wonder.
my hometown, but like where you just start with like 3 characters and just let the world grow. But
That's cool.
there's just no way to
Um,
do that with the photorealist style.
yeah. Do you have any strong feelings about like Hank Ketchum, the Dennis the Menace guy's work?
His lines are gorgeous.
Yeah, because he's a really interesting guy, and just that he looks like everything he drew was like accidentally fell out of his pen, and it was all the perfect place.
Yeah, I hate those people.
Yeah, yeah. Like going out and trying to find a bad Alex Toth drawing.
Yeah, yeah. The well, I mean, and Stan Drake manages to do that with like, and then it looks realistic.
Oh
It's
yeah.
obviously photo referenced, but it still has all of that fell out of the pen cartooning, and it's like we saw a bunch of those in San Diego in person. It's like, man, it's just
Oh
it's
yeah, you
like
should have
this.
made some Stan Drake stuff.
It's
It was kind of
it's
pre-Liberty Meadows, is how you're describing it, right?
yeah, those were cool because someone else was doing the cartoon penciling, but then there's a couple panels where he inked it, and with his like fell out of the pen ink line over those Bigfoot cartoons, it's pretty sublime.
Right. Because if I'm remembering right about him, wasn't he drawing like Beetle Bailey for a while, or Blondie, I mean?
Blondie, yeah,
Yeah, he was
long
drawing
time.
Blondie, and then he switched over to the Kelly Green style. And
Yeah,
it
he
would,
would do Harder Juliet Jones and Blondie at the same time. So he'd be in that photorealist and then Blondie and then photorealist and Blondie. And
yeah, that must have made him really adapted as a cartoonist, being able to jump back and forth. Because I always feel like whenever, like I have a very kind of, I feel like I have this very Hergé cartoony style, and then I can push it more towards realism, but it kind of drags the whole style over, like it's like I have this much style and it can either be over here or over here.
well, but you have like a pencil approach that's a little different than your inked work too. Like when you
Yeah.
just do like figure drawing sketches and stuff.
Yeah,
There's more like use of the line weight of the pencil.
yeah, totally. I've noticed that when I'm drawing something and it's supposed to be finished in pencil, it's a very different thought process than when I'm drawing something that's going to be inked later. It's like um, it's like I can draw something and it'll be like this is finished, this is fine, and I get very like slow about how I pencil stuff. And then when I'm penciling something for inks, it's like every line is too ugly to ever use and it has to be fixed.
Yeah, I wonder, like, have you ever used a brush?
Yeah, actually, I got a brush recently and did a bunch of test drawings with it, and I keep thinking I want to go back because I love that idea. I think Sim talks about in Strange Death, where he talks about the brush being like a lazy man's tool.
Yeah, supposedly that came from Neil Adams. I don't know exactly what that's supposed to mean. I guess because you can kind of just keep going with it. You don't have to keep redipping the pen.
I guess it's a lighter hand, right? You're just like going and just kind of letting it flow out, whereas like a pen, it's like you're more specific about everything.
Or maybe because like if I have like one of these, I just happen to have this. I'm assuming you use mostly this type of thing.
Uh, Pigma's always.
Yeah, pigment liners. Um, like if you want to change line weight, you have to actually go like you don't ever really get thicker than the pen allows you by very much, but you would have to like go and outline it and then fill it in. So that's more work. Whereas a brush, you can just get the line weight change all at once. I don't know that that's lazy though. That's just like smart in my mind. Like do it all at once instead of outline it and fill it in.
Yeah, it does make sense. I mean, it is a weird. I feel like a lot of the things that cartoonists tell themselves are like little lies, you know?
Yeah. It's just whatever gets you the result you need. But I do think there's something in your pencil work that would translate to brush for ink work.
Yeah, I should do a brush comic. I have this idea of always like doing a book for the European market first and then releasing it over in America secondary. And I feel like that would be a fun excuse to, get a beret and a brush and really, really see what I can do.
You should. I would love to see it.
Do a comic that feels like the freeway at night, so as
Yeah.
just as possible.
I think but like to me, your work is I mean, I come back to that a lot, but it's European first to me, so that makes sense.
Yeah, but I don't know. Sometimes I worry that it's European 20 years ago too, because I look at the stuff going on in Europe now, and I have this very cynical view where I was talking to someone recently about how French comics specifically in the 1970s and 80s really peaked for me, and then my way of describing post like 1980s French comics is like, oh, they got so tired of good drawing, they decided to just draw worse over there.
Well, and I've noticed that we've infected them with the computer coloring
Oh,
in the
sure.
last however long. Like I was just looking at the those Lucky Luke books I got by Matthew Bonhomme, and
Is
fuck,
that
he
a new
can.
Lucky Luke?
Yeah, they're like two. It's the man who shot Lucky Luke and Wanted Lucky Luke. They're oh no, your strip just fell down
Oh
in the
yeah, it
back.
just fell off.
Um,
I just bought a Lucky Luke book. I'm trying to remember where I put it.
it's not the old cartoony stuff though. It's somewhere in between the original Lucky Luke cartoony and then Moebius's Blueberry in
Okay.
terms of style, and the coloring is all that flat, Moebius style coloring, and it's
Nice.
gorgeous versus like a lot of that exact same stuff I've seen guys where I find them on Instagram and I'm like, oh my God, this pen and ink work is gorgeous. And then I look up the book and it's all computer colored and it looks like shit.
Yeah. Well, it's really fascinating. You know, Gilliam, did you read Gilliam March's Carmen?
Yeah, that's a gorgeous book.
Yeah, like that's really fascinating when you look at how he colored that next to how his DC work is colored, because it seems like a different artist when you look at the different styles.
And his Laura and other stories, he's way more like overusing the computer coloring. Whereas Carmen's much, it feels like you colored it almost. I mean, it has kind of your palette and
Oh,
like
it's definitely in the same vein as the stuff I like. Well, I think that also that Carmen is newer than the other stuff.
okay.
I think the
So
other stuff is reprinted.
he's gotten more sophisticated.
Yeah, I mean that thing kind of is maddening how crazy detailed and perfect it is. And
But
like
also
small
like the
details.
coloring is very much more flat colors, not so bombastic, which is what I
Yeah,
mean
yeah,
by sophisticated, like less going on, doing more work.
yeah. I mean, I always feel like I use color to just like accent things and not, you know, it's like the ink has to hold the thing and then the color is just kind of there.
Yeah, which is what he did on Carmen as well.
Yeah, yeah, I definitely like the colors in that.
Whereas his covers and stuff almost feel like Adam Hughes colored it, you know, like with all the gradients and special effects. And
Yeah, yeah, that is interesting. I mean to go back and read some Adam Hughes comics because I think of him as a pinup guy and I always forget that he writes and draws his own comics.
he's a good writer, but I find him a thoroughly disappointing interior artist. I always go, oh, Adam Hughes did interior. Oh, cool. I love his work. And then I read it and I'm like, oh, fuck, this sucks.
He's set up, I think he's set up a problem for himself where you oftentimes just think of him, or at least I think of him as just a guy that draws really pretty girls. And so if he draws anything that's not just like pinup girls on every page, you're just like, what is this? This Jughead's going to the store, you know?
Well, there's something about the way he uses outlines as well that just something, it's like that Alphonse Mucha thing where you like totally outline the whole thing and it's all closed off and clogged up and it's just not good for the realistic style he has. And something about like when it's a one-off like cover,
Mhm.
it works because it has like a graphic design effect to it, but like panel to panel or something, it's too static and his lines are too clogged up. I don't know.
You think it's almost too polished for comics that need just like more of that just Toth, every line is perfect while I work quickly feeling?
It's just like not all the lines need to touch, you know, like have some gaps here and there
Okay. Yeah.
for the way, I don't know, we'd have to pull it up and I could go through, but I always and he's just gotten, it's like Travis Charest, he perfected it a little too far. Like his early Wonder Woman covers and stuff where his colors were a little more chunky and cuts and stuff is good. And then it got too slicked and airbrushed and pencil underneath and colored over. And
I was trying to describe that recently about how there's types of artists where they become so good that I lose interest. Like it's almost
they
like a
lose
polish.
style. Like their style goes away and it just becomes, there's nothing particular about it anymore.
Hmm. Well,
And
there's
I
certain
feel
artists
like
that you watch their process as they get better, and I'm trying to think of an example. There's people who like it's really fun, like maybe Chris Bacalo when he was at Vertigo. It was really fun to see kind of what he was going to do next because it all felt really experimental and weird. And then by the time he kind of hit his like Marvel style, I kind of lost interest because it was almost like he'd become fully formed.
but at least he like fell into a really weird style.
Oh, sure.
Like someone like Adam Hughes or Travis Charest, they just, all of the little particularities that made their work so compelling to me got smoothed out in their kind of push for like realistic or something.
Yeah, I mean it's beautiful work, but it's weird too because I almost something I think about cartoonists like that is that like is I don't know if they will ever make a book that is um like a fully formed, like great comic book. You know, it'll always be a beautifully drawn comic book, you know, but I don't know if it's entirely like I don't know, maybe that's too harsh, because I was thinking of Cheris did that. He did like an X-Men Wildcats crossover, which is like just an intensely beautiful comic, and then I remember it just being almost unreadable.
Yeah, but that's when his style was cool. It
Yeah,
was
that was
still
pretty cool.
stylized. And I don't know if you've seen his stuff now, but it's like all of the particularities that made that era of his stuff uniquely him. And the other thing is there's a bunch of people who have learned how to do pretty much the same thing, but just faster.
Oh, sure, yeah, there's always yeah, I mean, there's a guy over at, I think there's a guy at Marvel who draws basically Arthur Adams style almost exactly now.
Oh yeah, Nick Bradshaw. We're gonna get in
Yeah.
trouble. We're throwing people under the. I'm gonna look up. I've I've done this with Travis Schray before. I don't know. I He was like my favorite guy, and so I guess I'm extra salty about him because it just got too.
Well, he went on and did Space Girl was the last, and then he did a Meta Barons thing.
The Meta Baron stuff is sick, but like that Space Girl stuff is still cool. It looks like
Oh,
him,
it's really nice. Yeah,
but like look at this. It's just
that's a little more. Well, it's funny that thing. I don't know why the. I'm not, and I feel like an asshole immediately for critiquing Travis Charezor because he draws better than me. But I don't know why the cross hatching is on the face. Part of me is just like, is it a shadow? Because isn't the color kind of doing shadow when you have gradation like that?
yeah, it's I don't know. It's and like it's a weird type of cross hatching compared to like when he was drawing like this.
Oh yeah, that's beautiful.
And that was just this was when this book came out was just one of my favorite things I'd ever seen.
Oh yeah, I like the Punisher's pants there.
Yeah, really interesting way of dealing with fabric and all that kind of stuff.
Like
And
Elvis.
then he went like the Drew Struzan kind of route, but I feel like his stuff is just it's like homogenized out to just like kind of run of the mill DC.
Weird. Is that recent?
Yeah.
Yeah, because that is less exciting to me than the other stuff. But part of it is that looks like an unfinished thing.
Yeah,
Like
I
that
don't know.
Wildcats
Yeah, he's a handsome
cover with all the
fellow though,
characters.
huh?
Yeah, look at that charming, handsome fellow. And
Damn,
there's
he
Adam
looks like
we were talking about.
Sean Austin, Rudy. But like his Meta Baron stuff is fucking amazing, but it almost got
Yeah,
like too good.
it looks like he did a page a year on that thing with the amount of detail on it.
I think he only ever finished like 10 pages of it or something. He was supposed to do a whole volume and he never finished it because it was like a page a year.
Yeah,
But it just gets kind of it loses.
that is very Drew Struzan.
Yeah, I don't know. It kind of lost something over time. Anyways,
Oh,
we're
there's his death.
what?
No, he had a version of death on the left side. If you scroll down, I think.
Oh, did he do? Oh, there we go.
Have you seen Mobius's death?
Yeah, that's a really beautiful image.
Yeah.
So this is still cool on the side. Maybe the other thing is like I just get as I got older, like that kind of stuff is just less interesting to me.
Yeah,
But anyways, like
that was
Adam
good.
Hughes is always I feel like on interiors. I really like his writing. He's a good writer, but
Okay, that's good.
as an interior artist, I don't know. I'm always like, oh shit, Adam Hughes is doing something, and I always forget that I'm not gonna like it.
Oh, I should say he did a Hellboy last year that I really liked.
I'll have to look at it.
It
But
was really weird how quiet it was. It just like was a one-shot Hellboy that came out, and it was just like written and drawn by Adam Hughes, and it's probably my favorite thing I've read by him.
well, I'll have to go look that up because I always just like I said, I always just kind of wind up disappointed.
Yeah,
I do always like his stories. I just don't like his art on interiors.
I'm trying to think because he wrote Betty and Veronica for a little while, and then he wrote did he do the Wildcat or the Gen 13 miniseries that he drew?
Yeah, he did and he did a Gen 13 one that Lee Bermejo illustrated.
Okay.
And it was a really fun story if I remember correct. And I really liked Lee's art at that point in time.
And then he did like a Dr. Manhattan thing, which I never read.
Yeah, that was the point where I was like, art's not working on the inside for me. He did an X-Men Wildcats one. That was the last time I liked his work on the inside.
Oh yeah, I remember that one being really nice. But yeah, I guess that one was the one set in the 80s because the Travis Jarris one was set in the 40s.
Yeah, and then there was a Jim Lee one, and I forget the other guy's name. There was four of them.
I didn't know there were 4 1.
Yeah, there were 4 of them. I forget, there was one in the future. I forget the guy's name that drew that. I liked him at the time. But I think part of what it is like back then he had flatter colors on the inside and it was more focused on the ink and it wasn't so illustration-y in every panel or something. I don't know.
Yeah, it's got to create an interesting thing when you have the ego about knowing that, especially like, I mean, people always talk about comic pages becoming worse storytelling things when you're aware of the resale value on a page. Like
like their original art
Jonathan Murphy,
resale.
yeah, doing like beautiful pages that might not be the best storytelling because that the original art's going to go for a small island when you
Yeah, the eye candy appeal of like the illustration looking page.
Yeah.
By the way, I should be spanked for shitting on people who try and aim more and more towards realism.
I mean, I think we talked at one point just about how painted comics are really hard because they create all these different problems because they're closer to reality.
Yeah, I like, again, I'll just acknowledge that obviously the only thing anyone knows me for is a book that we were aiming for super realistic artwork.
Yeah, totally. I mean, I think it's fun. I think it's fun to criticize things, and I hope that people listening are aware that like Adam Hughes and Travis Charest are fantastic artists that we're only talking about because they're so good. Mention like 20 artists that are not worth mentioning, but
yeah, that were like massively shaped who I am as an artist, but I think the other thing is, for me at least, the closer you get to, like, if I look at your work, I only have positive things that I can say about it because it's all the things that I wish I could do. But when you get towards like, okay, well, people who are drawing realistically, the closer they get to what I do, it's easier to see the flaws because you're looking at the things that you've been sitting around critiquing yourself about as well. So
yeah, and kind of nothing's worse than something that's kind of close to, when things get really close to your style, especially if somebody shows you something and they're like, this reminds me of you, that's probably like the worst thing. Then you'll look at it and be like, oh no,
yeah, you'll really like this looks like your work.
Yeah, it's a good way.
The last thing you want to see. Yeah, unless it's Stan Drake or Alex Raymond or the person who you're still chasing. But if it's in the realm, you're just going to be more particular about it. So I'll caveat that as well when I'm talking about Adam Hughes and Travis Charest and artists like that.
It would be fun to read individual books by theirs and talk about specifics. I remember there's a Travis Charest, however you say it, panel in one of the Wildcats issues he did that ran through, I think Richard Friend inked it, and then it was colored by someone else, but it has a backwards hand on it.
Oh shit.
I remember just thinking when it came out, like, how many people did this hand go through to turn out backwards? And just like, I think it's probably because Charest had such tight pencils that the inker and the colors were probably just like, this looks great, I'm not even thinking about it.
Yeah, and I will also say, like, that dude Travis Charest, he does all of that without any reference.
Oh, and that's before J.H. Williams works without reference, which is maddening to me.
Yeah, and that is to be applauded to, I mean, like the ends of the earth, because that is just absolutely astonishing. I know Adam Hughes is more likely to use, he has models and stuff, but I could only wish, that I could do that. I wish I could find a Adam Hughes thing here that I could point out what exactly it is about it that that turns me off these days.
Yeah, I mean, I bet if you look up some of his like Dr. Manhattan pages, because Dr. Manhattan was the one that I remember looking at and thinking like, oh, it needs more pretty girls in it.
Well, here's a Betty and Veronica
Yeah, it's very,
without the color.
yeah, it's
His
really beautiful illustration, but it feels a little claustrophobic to me. Like I just wanted a little backed off in some ways.
so what gets me is that his line looks like he's going back over it to get line weight changes.
Okay.
And so you get areas like this where everything's like touching too much, and the line weights just bleed into each other and create these gummed up. Like this looks very gummed up to me. This is very inelegant, gummed up. It's like a crack in the cement that someone squoze tar into, and the tar's kind of like blobbing out from the crack and making the crack a little bit fatter. Like, and that's all of his inking is like that to me. It's just a
Like that
gross
kind of
line
flourish
quality.
she's doing on the door frame. You see the part that's like a little squiggle on the right there, like I guess between her hand and her head. I like that kind of looseness.
Oh, yeah. If there was more of that, it would be good. Right. That's responsive, but this is stuff I try and get my students to stop doing. And that may be a style preference, but like, I don't know, just the line weight to me on his more recent work is really, I don't find it appealing at all. Like
there's a silhouette thing that I find a little frustrating because sometimes I'm like, I don't know if the lighting really matches the way the silhouettes are going. Yeah, I'm really conflicted because it's like, and it almost gives me the impression he's drawing it really small for how there's not a lot of air.
Yeah, and the lines feel that way too. Like he's drawing it at size and it's a little too thick and chunky or something. Here's another really good example of like this line could have just cascaded down into this line, but then he like went back and like colored this one in to make it touch, and then here it's like connects out here instead of down into the hat, so it's like outlining the whole thing instead of having this be a separate line and this popping up from behind it.
Okay, that makes sense.
He's flattening everything out, which on a, it works from a graphic standpoint, but in the narrative it just looks overly defined or something, like overly, like here, why is the thickness from the cheek touching the thickness of the nose? Why is the thickness
one
of
of
the
the
nose
finished
not?
pages because it's really fascinating because he drops the black out of the lines and makes them all kind of like brownish a little bit, like the page on the left when you see the comic page.
Yeah,
it's an interesting effect. Like I don't know if I like it, but I think it's I like this. I like that it's a thing, if that makes sense.
yeah, there's other artists who do this better though, I think, but and that what he'll further reinforce what I'm talking about, where she looks like a sticker. Like there's just this big thick outline around her, and then these lines, instead of having this line carry down into the head, which is actually where the form is at, he carries to the outline.
Well, it does a weird thing on her when her hand is touching the window frame. I think the line dropping out there almost makes it look like there's some kind of force field that's being broken.
Right here.
I mean, yeah, on both the things with the hand, they're kind of like, it makes it look like she's glued to the window and cannot not be released from it.
Yeah, but, like it's like she's connected. Yeah, and the force field, like everything's contained in an overly thick force field or something. Just looked at a book. Let's see if I can find this guy's art. JEC. He just sent me.
I was happy with Clarker.
Yeah, well, Clarker actually got some of his art where he's doing the dropped out line colored things, but
I know his work.
But his lines are broken up, so there's not that force field thing all over, and the colors are changing, and I don't know. It's not, like the line stops and then the finger shows up. Like Adam Hughes would have like colored one big thick black, or like here the thickness goes down.
Yeah.
Adam Hughes would have colored thick all the way around. And he's getting that from Alphonse Mucha, who did it really well. But
yeah, James Edward Clark is really good. And there's another death.
Well, yeah, Sandman came out. Where's that at? Oh, here. Yeah. So he's doing that colored line thing, but I think it's more effective. So anyways, we started out talking about our process and we wound up shitting on Adam Hughes. But same thing with the color on the hair. And
I mean, I have complicated feelings about Adam Hughes because it's definitely really beautiful work, but it's not how I would go about it.
Yeah, I like his older stuff better, like the old Wonder Woman covers, but that might just be my memory of him too. So
no, I had a whole thing with my girlfriend about Adam Hughes the other day because I was trying to describe. I was like, he draws girls that look like upside down triangles to me. And she's like, "What are you talking about?" And I was like, "He's really into the bodybuilder type, so he would draw like
yeah,
big like broad shoulders and kind of a thinner waist." And then I had to bring up examples, and I went through like 15 drawings of his to find one example, and she was like, "That's not a good example then." But for me, that was just what stood out, is like how he drew like Fairchild or Wonder Woman. Yeah, like Wonder Woman, he draws very much like an upside down, like a V.
but see, yeah, he does. That's what She-Hulk needs to look like in this series that's coming out. But there's a difference between how he handled this with like these animation cuts, and then that solid outline works really well. And then he got into this type of thing where it's way more rendered.
Yeah.
Like the coloring is doing a lot more work. And I don't know. I really fond of this era. And then that force field outline for some reason works better for me.
Yeah, well, I guess it works. He probably has more time to perfect it, and that's a really nice one.
Yeah, that's like the era that I was just absolutely in love with what he was doing. And it may be that someone else is inking him because that clogged problem isn't on these things on his covers. It may be that
I would suspect that it's how much time he has to spend on every drawing.
It could be. To me, it almost looks like he's spending too much time on some of them. It's like too much going back and fucking with the lines instead of just letting them be. But
sure,
these things I still find to be like pretty gorgeous, impeccable pieces of art.
That's a really nice one.
Yeah, nothing bad to say about those. But when he goes to interiors, it's always goes into those gummy problems that I was just pointing out. Anyways, we're way as we do, we're way far from where we started, and I need to go spend some time with the dogs and the lady and cook dinner.
Oh yeah. Well, it's good talking to you about this stuff. Next time we'll have to start talking about an artist if there's an artist who does great interiors, whose cover work we don't like for some reason.
Oh, I'll have to think about that.
Yeah, well,
that's a good question, Brandon. I'll mull it over. Okay, that's our next formalism. All right. Well, thanks for putting up with us, open-ended chatting, and I'll try and figure out how to turn this one into a podcast since there was no real visuals.
Excellent.
All right. Later, guys. Make sure to like, smash that subscribe button, and ring that bell.